Welcome to our Insight Hub session, Resetting Sustainability Strategies, Doing More with Less in a Challenging Economic Landscape. So we'll start with something that will probably feel very familiar. I want to start with a feeling many sustainability managers know all too well, the pressure to do more with less time, less budget, fewer people, but somehow more expectations and more reporting and more scrutiny. For a long time, the strongest internal argument was within the sustainability landscape. We need to do this, regulation is coming, but with the omnibus turbulence, political noise, and transparency fatigue, that line doesn't land the way it used to be. So the moment we say CSRD, CSDDD, compliance, people mentally leave the room, checks out. So today we are shifting the focus, and we want to look at how a sustainability manager can still make progress even when resources are tight, by changing this conversation. So by moving from compliance language to business language, and by grounding sustainability in resilience, cost stability, market access, and what matters for the company. So really making the business case of it. So today we have picked a role play and a role play format specifically. So it's a chance to step into the reality of being a sustainability manager right now, and explore what it really takes to keep things moving when the tools, the data, and the capacity aren't all ideal. So a quick introduction to those who haven't heard about us yet. Learning is an international management consultancy specialized in corporate sustainability and responsible business conduct based in Berlin. We advise companies on all aspects of human rights due diligence and corporate sustainability strategy and governance. So my name is Naz Akyol-Kaglar. I'm the head of marketing and communications here at Learning, and I also work as a consultant for sustainability communications, impact assessment, reporting, and training projects. So I'll be moderating today's session. And I'm here with two of my dear colleagues, Zara Blanc and Maxine Wischler, who are driving the strategy and governance work streams at our company. So Zara is a managing consultant who works with multinational companies on human rights and environmental due diligence, and drawing her experience in the textile and apparel retail sectors. She also leads our consulting team and helps shape how we approach our project work. Maxine is a senior consultant specializing in sustainability reporting and double materiality assessments. She develops strategies aligned with international frameworks, and also supports clients in implementing human rights due diligence across their value chains. So before we start, let me remind us a few things. Our Insight Hub sessions are structured as 45 minutes webinars featuring experts' insights and interactive discussions with our audience. Towards the end of the session, we will take 15 minutes to answer your questions. You can post your questions at any time in the Q&A function. You can also upload existing questions to help us prioritize those that are most relevant to you. If we run out of time or any questions remain unanswered, we will follow up with the answers after the session. And a recording of the webinar will be available for you to share with your colleagues afterwards. Yes, so let's get started. So for today's session, we will be doing a role play to explore what it feels like to be a sustainability manager, trying to do more with less. So I'll be stepping into a fictional character now, Anna, the sustainability manager at a fictional company called Aaron Apparel Group. So Aaron is a large multinational with about 12,000 employees We source from 10 key production countries and work with around 200 suppliers and operate mid-market and premium brands across more than 30 countries. So our sustainability team is intentionally lean, a core group of 6 people responsible for ESG strategy, due diligence, and reporting. And a bit of context here, because of a declining discretionary spending and raising operational costs, the board recently announced a 25% cut to all non-core budgets, including sustainability. A headcount freeze reduced our team from 9 to 6, with several planned hires cancelled and multiple initiatives paused. And the new directive from the group's management is very clear: do more with less and focus on what matters. So with that backdrop, imagine this scenario now. So I arrive at the office and find a message from one of our key investors. In recent weeks, several companies in our sector have been linked to human rights issues within high-risk region, and the investor wants reassurance that Aaron is not facing a similar risk. So their questions are very direct. They're asking about how robust our human rights due diligence is, what processes and controls do we have for suppliers in high-risk regions, which KPIs or data points show that we are actually monitoring these risks, and ultimately, how confident are we that we are not exposed? So at first, it seems like a straightforward request, but as I start pulling information together, I realized how scattered everything is: outdated KPIs, unclear responsibilities, silos, incomplete data, and a team that is already stretched thin. So it's a situation many of you can relate, and rising scrutiny, fewer resources, and pressure to give basically clear answers fast. So that's the situation that I'm in right now. And of course, once the investor request lands, internal questions begin. So I'm receiving multiple requests coming from different departments. So this is where I will turn to our speakers in this role play. Zara and Maxine will be my advisors, helping me thinking through how to respond to the investor and how to coordinate internally and how to keep moving with the resources we have. So I will start with the very first request coming from legal. So Maxine, I would like to start with you. So from the legal, I'm receiving these questions. They're landing on my desk internally. So here are the questions. What is our current compliance position under the relevant due diligence laws? Which requirements apply to us right now? Where do we still have gaps? Do we have enough documentation to demonstrate that our due diligence is functioning in high-risk regions? Yeah, what would you advise me to, go ahead with?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for bringing these questions to us, and we hope that we can walk you through them in a more practical manner and give you some guidance in going forward in a lean and efficient manner. So the legal side of the investors' questions that you've received is also a good starting point, because before you start talking about suppliers or the actions, you need to have clarity on the regulatory expectations and on whether the due diligence at Aaron is functioning in these high-risk regions. And so in this regard, the investor is fundamentally asking, is the company exposed to the same human rights risks as others in the sector? And could this affect Aaron's operations, its cost, or its market access, for example? And in order to answer confidently, you and the legal team in this case need to have clarity on two main areas. So firstly, what are your legal obligations under the due diligence laws that apply today? And secondly, can you prove whether your due diligence processes are actually working in the high-risk regions? So in this situation, we recommend that you assess and align. That's what we call it. So this includes mapping which due diligence requirements actually apply to you based on your size, the sector, and your geographic footprint. This could be the EU CSDDD, the German Supply Chain Act, or other national legislations in the different geographic regions that you work in. But also given your resources at the moment, these laws shouldn't be looked at in isolation. So instead, look at overlaps. What are the common elements across the different frameworks? This can help you avoid building 3 or 4 separate systems, but instead you're actually going to invest once in processes and documentation that satisfy multiple regulations at the same time. The aim here is to really understand where can synergies be created instead of working in parallel work streams. And also, like I said, particularly in current times or in the situations that you're in, where regulatory pressures keep increasing, but your resources have actually been decreasing. So hopefully this removes some of the additional weight on your shoulders. So after laying out the applicable legal requirements, you are able to run a targeted gap analysis, where your existing systems would be assessed and checked against questions, for example, whether your risk assessments are updated, do you have policies in place and have they been shared with business partners, or are there escalation paths and clear responsibilities? By looking at these points, it'll be clear as to what is working well, what's missing, and also what needs to be prioritized. Only at this point will it be possible to check whether Aaron has enough evidence to demonstrate that the measures in place are effective and your due diligence is also working. And this goes beyond measures on paper, but really looks at proof. So we recommend looking at like screening records, follow-up actions, grievance mechanisms, and also to continuously engage with your suppliers. If evidence is incomplete or your actions are proving to be not as effective as you actually thought they would, it's important to build and strengthen these, including the documentation that regulators, or in this case, investors, are expecting. So from a legal standpoint, this process gives you a clear view of your obligations, your current compliance positions, and the evidence you already have to show the measures are implemented and effective. And this means that you can respond to the investors with clarity and also credibility.
Thank you so much for the advice. Yeah, it's definitely a lot, but I'll take some time to reflect on it. So I'm also receiving similar requests from the procurement department. So basically, these are some of the questions that I have been asked. Have our suppliers in the specific high-risk region been assessed recently? What information do we have on their hiring practices, risk controls, and past audit findings? Is our supplier data complete and up to date? Or do we need some additional checks before responding to the investor? What would you say about these?
Yeah, so compared to the legal questions that we just looked at, these are quite operational. So procurement wants to understand what is already known about the suppliers in high-risk regions, whether recent assessments exist, and also whether the data that Aaron has is complete enough to give a soundproof reply to the investor. Before jumping straight into the procurement questions, it's worth recognizing how close they are linked back to the compliance work that we just looked at under Assess and Align. So through the Assess and Align process, you have ideally gained clarity on the obligations you have to meet, the gaps that exist, and the evidence you already have. And so these insights don't stay just in the legal space, they directly shape what procurement actually needs to focus on next. The gaps identified on the compliance side therefore become the priorities and the next steps. So you might be thinking that it's great that you know what the gaps are, but really, like, where do you begin? And this is also questions that we get asked frequently. And this is where a roadmap or an action plan becomes essential, because it lays out the first steps and the priorities, as well as who needs to do what. So a roadmap begins by taking the results of the gap assessment and translating them into clear prioritized actions. And especially with the limited resources that you have at the moment, not every supplier can be assessed at once. So the roadmap may, as an example, identify which suppliers require immediate assessment, what documentation must be collected, and which controls need to be strengthened. And I say this as an example because a roadmap can also be broader and help you tackle different elements of a due diligence system. And going beyond prioritizing actions, a roadmap also lays out who owns what, which is actually just as important. And one of the biggest challenges that we see in is that sustainability often sits in isolation, when in reality it really needs to be integrated across departments, including procurement, compliance, legal, human resources, and other operations. And by clarifying these roles and responsibilities, the roadmap ensures sustainability isn't its own topic, but a shared effort across the company. And once priorities are set, you will need to set measurable milestones and align implementation across the departments. Here too, the roadmap ensures that team members aren't running parallel processes, but actually working in sync. Again, ultimately, this also takes off the weight off your shoulders or any sustainability officer. One more point in addition to the roadmap, it's also necessary that data exists, and data needs to be accurate and up to date in order to be provided to an investor, like in this case. This is what we call integrated reporting, and it's what becomes really important, especially if data tends to be fragmented and scattered across departments, or sometimes it can even just be sitting in your email inboxes. And this is also a reality that we see across many companies, so you do not need to think that you're in this alone. However, in order to have a structured action plan and a robust due diligence management system, your data also needs to be well organized. So it needs to be centralized, and designing a monitoring framework can really help you set targets and help you keep track of the actions and your progress. So it's about refining KPIs so that you can measure things like your improvement in hiring practices, the controls, or grievance mechanisms. Or also, for example, it would allow you to track supplier risks continuously and not just during audits. And as I mentioned, a monitoring framework helps to centralize this, or at a minimum, it can also create clear oversight of who holds which data. So just to wrap up, and following these points, you can, ideally even with limited resources, show not only where you stand today, but that you have a clear and integrated plan to manage and reduce the underlying risks by doing more with less and also strengthening resilience in the process throughout. I hope this has been insightful.
Yes, very much indeed. Yeah, it feels like you have actually laid out the first three elements of a very lean management process. And also, I feel like these, without these operational steps already in existence in my management processes for sustainability management, it's going to be very hard to respond to the questions that are coming from the procurement and legal departments. So it's definitely something like as a preventative measure rather than being a reactive one. Yeah, thanks. So I'm also having some receiving some questions from the finance, specifically from the CFO herself. So she's asking whether we are exposed to any financial operational risks linked to the suppliers. Could this escalate into a reputational or market access issue? Or do we need to adjust any risk provisions or brief the audit committee? So here I would like to turn to you next, Zara. I guess, once the investor inquiry surfaces, I guess these are the usual questions that any CFO would ask. What would you say about these?
Well, thanks for the questions, Anna. And I guess everyone working in sustainability understands why the CFO perspective comes in so strongly here. I have been in this situation in my in-house roles as well. And as soon as the CFO or any board member pops up at the discussion, usually sustainability managers face a little bit of panic. And I mean, what's important to recognize is that situation, it's not only about the specific supplier inquiry, right? So, I mean, those kind of inquiries, they are primarily a test of how strong your internal governance actually is. So even though I know might sound a little bit controversial because Anna, you just told me you're quite busy, you're overwhelmed, the team is shrinking, there's a lot of things to do on your plate. But I would always suggest to take a step back and have like a closer look why the lack of governance and oversight causes more work for everyone and how it can help to be more lean and efficient in such cases. Having the bigger picture when all the details are scattered on your desk might be not necessarily the first instinct or the first thing a sustainability manager wants to do. But for me, I feel there is a lack of discussion on why governance is so important, especially in economic pressuring situations like these. In general, governance is a big word and might also be at the same time this fuzzy, blurry concept to a lot of people. But personally, I'm a big fan of the take that a strong governance framework is the backbone of your risk management in terms of sustainability. So it ensures confident decision-making, clear accountability, and proper oversight, which are, in my experience, a big plus when it really comes to leveraging sustainability. But let's have a look at how this turns out in regards to the CFO's question. So a strong governance framework gives us a structured way to assess the severity of the issue, meaning we know exactly who evaluates the risk, how quickly, and based on which criteria. So instead of scrambling to interpret incomplete information, governance ensures that risk management is systematic, comparable, and defensible. And that allows us to give a clear picture of whether there is a material exposure or if the situation remains contained. And in addition, what governance also does is to define when and how an issue needs to be escalated. For example, which indicators trigger involvement from legal, compliance, or also maybe senior leadership. And with those escalation thresholds in place, we can confidently then say which issues could become reputationally sensitive and which ones should remain operationally managed. And that clarity protects the organization from but also from underreacting. Coming back to your actual question, for example, if the audit committee needs to be involved, governance again plays a key role here. So if we have clear ownership and decision rights, for example, who signs off on severity assessment, who recommends provision, who updates the audit committee, and so on, then the CFO doesn't need to rely on ad hoc judgment. The process itself provides accountability, right? So strengthening this part of governance ensures that risk provision isn't based on one manager's view, but more on a structural internal decision making. What does it mean in short? Strong governance doesn't just help us respond to this specific inquiry. It improves actually the quality, consistency, and defensibility of our decisions overall at a company. So it gives finance confidence, it reduces the risk of surprises, and ensures that oversight bodies like the audit committee are engaged at the right time and for the right reason. And in this specific case where a human rights allegation is on the plate, your system shows actually the blank spots and directly points in the direction where there is room for improvement. So not only in situations like this, but also on a general level, your maybe, level of maturity is also a little bit exposed during these times. So a good governance setup, in my opinion, pays off because it's simply more efficient and also more reliable. So that's why I would also recommend, after the storm is over, Anna, take a step back and have a look at your structures, especially at your governance structures.
Thank you, Zara, for this advice. Yeah, indeed, I think without a good governance setup, it's going to be too hard to implement the strategy and the execution itself. So thanks for these points. So I'm also receiving some questions from the communications, and obviously, as you would know, usually the first 24 hours is very essential in the communications to say or not to say something about issues that are coming in. So they're asking, what can we safely say externally at this stage? Do we prepare a holding statement, a group statement for Aaron, or wait until the internal checks are complete? And how do we ensure consistency between what we tell the investor and what we communicate publicly? How would you guide me in managing these expectations, Sarah?
I mean, on the communication side, the first thing I'd emphasize is that this is a complex topic. Like human rights due diligence or human rights infringement are not something that can be handled with a quick statement or improvised messaging, to my experience, because it just requires accuracy, nuance, and alignment across teams. So human rights issues have multiple layers of legal, operational, and ethical considerations that cannot be reduced to simple reactive messaging. And yeah, for example, a single allegation, let's say the potential restriction of freedom of association at a warehouse, or a reported case of discriminatory hiring practices at a site in a high-risk region, touches on different systems at once. So you have, for example, the regulatory exposure under LKSG or the upcoming EU CSDDD, but also internal grievance and escalation procedures and supplier management processes, and last but not least, the company's broader public commitments on human rights. And because these elements sit across legal, HR, procurement, operations, sustainability, no team holds the full picture, right? So that's why communication must be aligned, accurate, and risk-aware before anything is shared externally. Coming back to your question at this stage, you should only say externally what we, or you in this case, can substantiate internally. That means sticking to confirmed facts. You can, for example, go for you're conducting a structured review, you're taking human rights seriously, and you follow your clear due diligence process. Anything beyond, you should wait until the internal checks are complete, simply to avoid inconsistency or premature commitments. And regarding the holding statement, I find like it can be useful, especially if there's a lot of media exposure. But also that's a little bit up to how you treat those things at your corporation. How has Aaron, acted in this way before? But also here it is really, you have to take care that is carefully coordinated. And also that coordination is exactly where, for example, strong internal capacity matters, because these situations often show how important it is for communication teams to understand the basic of the company's sustainability and human rights strategy, for example. And when that awareness isn't there, the sustainability manager ends up spending considerable time explaining fundamentals instead of focusing on the actual risk assessment. So in the long term, investing in capacity building through, for example, regular briefings, awareness sessions, or training really pays off, because it reduces friction, enables faster and more confident responses, especially since you ask to reply also within the first 24 hours, and ensures that teams speak with one voice. And that leads to your third question. about consistency. So the only way to guarantee alignment between what we tell the investors and what we communicate publicly is through a clear governance process. Again, I'm sorry, I'm a fan. This process reviews messaging, who reviews the messaging, who signs off, and how do you ensure that sustainability expertise flows into every external communication. And at Learning, we also have the Learning Academy. You maybe heard about this, but also we really do care about capacity building a lot because it really helps. When teams are trained, confident, and familiar with the due diligence framework, we're not only relying on a single person to translate complex issues under time pressure, and this also then translates to other departments as well, because obviously human rights is a complex issue, and you already shared like some perspectives, some questions that are coming from different directions. And I feel like this is now also a good point to make, that everyone needs to be on board on how a company understands this and wants to move forward with this. So creating awareness and enabling different functions is, it really helps to reduce also the workload over time. So again, in summary, keep external messages factual and limited for now, prepare carefully aligned holding statement if needed, and strengthen internal understanding so that next time you can respond faster, more consistently, and with far less burden on the sustainability function.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the summary. Yeah, indeed, I need to really bring in these teams way too early and start collaborating on these matters in advance. So I've been actually taking some notes as you speak, and I have mapped out a process based on your suggestions that I can implement to be better prepared for cases where we need to be where we find ourselves in a situation where we need to do more with less, basically. So as Maxine said, the initial step is to assess and align. So to really understand the regulatory requirements and assess our current status, what's already strong, what's missing, what the real risks and gaps lie. Second, develop a strategic roadmap. Without a roadmap, nothing is possible. Develop a clear phased plan with defined milestones to integrate these requirements, regulatory requirements, into the core business, rather than just layering on additional work. Third, integrated reporting, very important. But obviously, without tracking and monitoring, you cannot also report. So strengthening the data collection across different teams, functions, sharing and tracking systems to streamline reporting, increasing transparency and reducing the duplication of effort across different teams. This is also very important. The fourth, governance and oversight, enhancing governance structures to support faster, clearer decision-making, accountability and oversight. As you said, Zara, without a good governance, no strategy, no execution. So I should become a fan of it, just like you are. So especially when resources are limited. So that, yeah, basically I act as a bridge builder between the corporate strategy and the execution. And the fifth, training and mentoring to build capacity across teams, stakeholders, suppliers, so implementation becomes way smoother for me and more sustainable over time as well. So I feel like with this setup, we're not just treating the symptoms, just responding to a bunch of questions when there is like a pressure point, when the pressure increases, but rather we are building a preventative system, more a lean approach, which would mean that we would have fewer surprises, less last-minute dramas, panics, and more resilience, basically, even when budget and resources are tight. Do you have any additions to this setup, or otherwise I will now open the floor for the questions which would be coming from the audience.
You perfectly summarized it, Anna.
Cool. Yeah, so now I'll open the floor to the questions. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A function if you haven't already. So maybe while we wait for a few more questions to come in, I can maybe bring in two couple of additional points linked to the steps we just discussed. So Zara, you said that governance is obviously the backbone of everything, right? So I think that there are a lot of companies who tend to maybe underestimate this part of the operational step, right? So what would you say, like, what is the biggest difference that a company can make in terms of designing a good governance within an organization?
I mean, from my experience, which is now 8 years working in business and human rights, I had a lot of insights into companies with different ambition levels also. So, and I always find like those who are interested in leveraging sustainability into business opportunities, also or into business success, they feel also a lot more willing to treat sustainability governance in the same way they treat other governance issues. Governance is not exactly new to corporations. If you have a look at the classic ESG part, like the G stands for governance also, and you have a look at those topics in there, you come across, like, for example, tax and so on. And at one point, all those topics were new to corporations, but they managed to integrate that, and they managed to create some accountability and responsibilities for everyone within the corporation. And for sustainability, it now has to be treated in the same way, because otherwise sustainability will always be treated as this cost driver, this little separated function, so to say. So for me, like, the best advice I could actually give is, like, treat sustainability as every other topic before. Like, things change. You need to prepare for different kind of scenarios, so to say. So sustainability really should now be implemented into your core practices.
Great, thanks so much for this. There is another question popping up in the chat. So many companies are dealing with fragmented data and constantly shifting timelines. What is your advice on sequencing? In other words, what should they realistically prioritize first in the reporting process to avoid bottlenecks later on? Maxine, what would you say about this? It feels like this is your turf.
Yeah, so it's a challenge that we see very clearly, especially in the context of the CSRD. With this regulations, companies are really being tested on the data that they have available, the processes that also exist in collecting data. And it's been a burden, I would say, on many teams, and often also sustainability managers that have to manage all of this. And I would recommend that to really start off by understanding the type of data that exists, but also where it actually sits and who owns it. So it's normal that different teams will work on different elements. You know, the social team have more the human rights lens, but then there can be a mix between the energy department or also environmental teams that look at different elements, but that needs to come together. So, but once you know who has access to what type of data, it's clear to have this oversight and to build reporting structures back to one centralized person. It's a team effort in the end, and that's why, again, sustainability also needs to be a joint effort across different departments. But yeah, once reporting structures are also in place, and also I recommend building regular reporting cycles, or data collection cycles rather, so that not everything comes together at once if a request like this comes in, or if the reporting period for the CSRD starts.
Great, very insightful, thank you. I have one final question for both of you. So what is one thing that you think it is non-negotiable for a sustainability management process to be lean, effective, and efficient within an organization? One thing that you would advise to a sustainability manager like me, Anna, or anyone in the audience?
I mean, I'm repeating
Let's start
myself.
with Sarah. Yeah.
I'm repeating myself. I said it before. I think probably I'm the biggest fan of governance under the sun, so to say. But yeah, really, to be honest, like if you want to professionalize your sustainability game, you need like a solid governance for that, because otherwise it won't be integrated into core processes, and you will always have this loss of efficiency and lean process management.
Great. What would you say, Maxine?
Yeah, I think just to complement what Sarah said, the capacity building is also crucial in this. To get different teams on board, they also need to understand why sustainability matters to them and what they can bring to the table. So yeah, spread the news about sustainability, why it's important, and how everyone can contribute to it.
Great. Thank you so much, both. And thank you also again to everyone who joined us today. We hope this session gave you some ideas moving forward. We look forward to seeing you at another session. Take care and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.